Am I blue? Am I blue? Ain't these tears in my eyes telling you? Am I blue? You'd be too if each plan that you had done fell through. There was a time I was your only one, but now I'm the sad and lonely one.
Beautiful. And you'll keep your part of the bargain? A deal's a deal. He can stop now. Not on your life.
I should say.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the season finale of Superhero Pantheon, as we will be taking a significant break from doing this podcast. Brian and I will still be with you every week doing Pantheon Plus, but this is our last edition of Superhero Pantheon for quite some time, and we'll get into some of the reasons why. And I think our discussion on the movie Black Panther is actually going to kind of hint at some of the reasons why we're going to be taking a significant break. But I think one of the things that we unfortunately have to do is, Brian and I are kind of always joking about the timing of things and how it all works out when it comes to this podcast and just some of the strange happenings. This week, though, as we are recording this, we had some unfortunate timing, as it was announced last Friday that Kevin Conroy, who I would consider the voice of Batman, passed away at the age of 66. It was said that he had a very short battle with cancer. And I think this episode was always going to be a little bit emotional because the intention was to talk about Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Of course, that movie heavily impacted by the unfortunate passing of Chadwick Boseman due to colon cancer some 2 years ago. And now, even before we do that, we're going to be spending some time talking about the great Kevin Conroy, who I think you would agree, Brian, is in many ways the voice of Batman. As much as I think we like Michael Keaton, we like Christian Bale, we like Ben Affleck, maybe not so much Val Kilmer and George Clooney, but I think for so many, I think Kevin Conroy is the default. This is a man who was in Batman the Animated Series. He went on to voice the character in numerous video games, other animated TV shows like Justice League and Batman Beyond. He also voiced Batman in some animated movies that were Justice League related or crossing over with Superman or other characters as well. I would say that, in terms of theatrically, of course, he got to do the voice of Batman in what I would consider to be probably the best Batman story ever told on screen, that being Batman Mask of the Phantasm. So we are going to spend some time talking about Kevin Conroy before we discuss Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. So, Brian, I know you unfortunately had to wake up to the news. You may have even woken up to the DM that I sent you as shortly after it was announced, and it definitely hit me hard, and I would imagine it hit you hard as well.
Yeah, it sucks because the night before I just watched Wakanda Forever with my group of geek friends, and especially with my one friend who I always consider like my comic book expert. His name's David. Shout out to David. I always go to him every time I have questions and stuff, but he's even a bigger Batman the Animated Series fan than I am. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he loves it to death. He collects all the figures. He's read the books. He's read it since the start when Bruce Timm introduced Harley Quinn into the comic books. Like, he's that big of a fan going all the way back. And he messaged me 2 a.m, man, and it sucks. I woke up and I felt like I had just kind of had this closure when I'm saying goodbye to Chadwick Boseman, and all of a sudden, bam! All of a sudden, you get sad again. But it sucks, man, because at our age, especially with like our parents' ages, I mean, 66, man, like 67, like that's my mom's age. She was born in the same year, 55. So that kind of puts things in perspective. Life is so fragile, and sometimes you take things for granted, and sometimes these things kind of come out of nowhere. But it's one of those things where no one knew he was sick, apparently, and he elected to kind of have that kind of almost kind of private in that short battle that he had. We don't even know what kind of cancer it was, but still, it's, cancer sucks and it's unfortunate. But man, he's a total legend. You know what I mean? And it's not just the fact that he did Batman in the animated series. For me personally, because I don't know, like I really went on this run earlier, like 10 years ago, like binging the Justice League show, and not even realizing that it was still like in the same continuity as Superman the animated series and Batman the animated series. So for him to do that and kind of carry this, like, he's kind of like the anchor, the Iron Man of that Justice League series to me, because he was the original. You know what I mean? He was the first in that continuity. And so him carrying over and then carrying over to the Batman Beyond series, which also got another 100+ episodes, and him portraying the same character but older. It's like he got to do this lifelong arc with the character that most people can't do or don't have the chance to do. Someone like, Harrison Ford with Indiana Jones, there's that kind of like longevity of a character. But it's rare you get that in animation. You know what I mean? Like, you look at like the Simpsons characters that have been around for 30 years and they don't really age much or like mature much or have any kind of arcs in their character. But you see what he did with the Batman character to go from like the young Batman earlier in 1992, and then slowly they aged him up until they got Robin, until Robin actually aged to be an adult, and we got Nightwing within that series to the point where we got Justice League. So we saw this full growth of Batman within almost like a 20-year span within the single continuity, and he was almost at the center of it completely. You know what I mean? I mean, you had Superman who had the same voice as the Superman from the animated series, but to me, he was that like rock and anchor that kind of put everything together, because it's like some of those Justice League episodes can be kind of non-focused on Batman, obviously, but when he's there for like one or two lines sometimes, or just, it's like, oh shit, man, that's Batman, and he's still there, and it's like it holds the continuity together. So him like portraying that same character for so many years in the same continuity, and then branching off and doing like alt-world stuff too as well. He did a tremendous job, and even some of the more recent work he's done on some of the more recent animated movies in the last 10 years, like him coming back and doing that. Just a tremendous job, man. And it sucks because that gravelly voice is so legendary. And I got to mark out really hard for when he did the live action old Bruce Wayne on the CW Flash crossover with the Crisis on Infinite Earths. And when he said, "I killed Clark Kent," and he said it with like no hesitation, I was like marking out, because, we hardly get to see a badass, ruthless Batman on screen. And he was able to give it to us in that kind of like older, like Clint Eastwood kind of vibe to it, you know what I mean? And I really marked out when he did the live action version of that, even though he didn't get to dress up in the suit, but still, like, with that voice, it just made that cameo so much more special.
I would say so. And the episode that you are referring to is Batwoman. He was on, fittingly, the episode of Batwoman as part of the big crossover. And I think it's really great that after all these years of playing the animated version, the fact that he was able to play a live action version, even if it was in a cameo role, I think it's unbelievable that he got to do that. I also want to point out a couple of other memorable things that he did. He got to do a voiceover with Adam West on an episode of Batman the Animated Series, Beware of the Gray Ghost. So if you want to hear kind of two iconic Batmen together, that is a great opportunity to do that. I also want to point out, Brian, that Kevin Conroy attended the Juilliard Academy, which is a very famous conservatory for many performers. Do you realize who he studied with while he was at the Juilliard Academy?
You sent me this note the other night, and I forgot it. But the most famous person I know from Juilliard was Robin Williams, correct?
He studied. I don't know what the relationship was, but he studied with Christopher Reeve. He studied with Robin Williams, and he studied with Francis Conroy. That is just an unbelievable group of performers.
And the reason the reason I say that is because what I've heard from the stories about Robin Williams is that he was so good at 16 that he graduated early. Like, he was such a genius from Juilliard. So he's like the most talented one to ever go through the program, basically.
I think that it's unbelievable. It's amazing that just that talented of a group. And Kevin Conroy has done a lot of other things besides play Batman. He was in soap operas. He was on stage. So I don't want us to ignore the fact that he did a lot of other things, even though he is going to be most associated with the Batman voice for so many people. And I think you and I we're thinking a lot about Kevin Conroy because we were discussing Spider-Man pretty recently, and I don't think we would put Christopher Daniel Barnes in the same category, because really the only Spider-Man voiceover work that he did was on the 1994, 95, and 96 mid-90s Spider-Man. But it really goes to show you the impact that voiceover performers can have and just what they can do. And I'm just tremendously impressed with what Kevin Conroy was able to do. Because, again, it's not just that he did Batman the Animated Series, which, like, if that's the only thing that he did, he would still be regarded as a really great voiceover performer. But the fact that he was continuing to play the character up until the last decade or so, it's pretty remarkable. And I'll say this: I think for me, anytime there was an animated Batman or Justice League movie and Kevin Conroy wasn't the voice, in the back of my mind, I was like, why is Kevin Conroy not the voice? Like, I get like the Superman thing, like Tim Daly is not as iconic as in that role. I think he's good, but obviously not as memorable. But come on, it's Kevin Conroy. Like, come on, it was just ridiculous to me. So anytime he got to return and play the role again, it was a real pleasure. And it's sad. I know he got to do the Killing Joke. I know that was a big deal to have Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy in those roles. I know the Killing Joke is a big deal for a lot of people. It is not something that I enjoy. I don't think the story is really good. And I guess for me, I was kind of hoping that we would get like one more like big time Kevin Conroy's Batman performance. Like that's the thing that I was hoping for. Would you agree with me on that? Were you really thinking like, let's get one more iconic Kevin Conroy's Batman performance?
Well, to my knowledge, in my thinking, I thought he was going to be part of that new Batman show that got not canceled on HBO Max, but switched to a possibly different distributor. Because that was like well into production, this new Batman animated series. And I thought it was going to be, because it has to do with Bruce Timm being producer, right? I thought he was going to be the voice for this one, but he's not even listed on IMDb or the wiki page. So I guess they didn't even cast him for that. Maybe they kind of knew ahead of time something was up. So maybe they knew that he was possibly sick and couldn't do it. So, because I was under the impression he was coming back for that, like for sure. So that's what I was kind of in shock. Like, wow, like he was just about to do a new Batman show, and I look and he's not even listed. So maybe they knew, casted someone else. But yeah, it's very unfortunate with the timing, because I really thought he was coming back, like for sure, for that new show. But I guess like they must have known something, because it's a different actor. But really quick, I wanted to point out too, like I'm a big Venture Brothers fan, and not a lot of people are, and it's kind of this obscure cartoon show that lasted like over a decade on Cartoon Network. Having seasons like every other year or something like that. But he portrayed this character called Captain Sunshine, and it's essentially just making fun of Superman, the character, and mixed with Batman. So when he's doing these lines and as he's portraying this character, Captain Sunshine, it sounds like he's like mocking himself playing Batman. So he can even have that feeling of like making fun of himself and having fun with it, because that Captain Sunshine character is so over the top. And when he portrays it, he sounds like he's this broken man. But because it's a comedy series, it's like, oh my God, we're laughing at his pain kind of thing. So even then, like he can make you laugh, even though he's kind of being serious at the same time. But he knows the context well. And I think that's why, like in certain episodes and like Batman the Animated Series, he can kind of make you laugh with these one-liners. Like Batman just made me laugh, and I wasn't expecting that, but that's because of his delivery, and because of his dark, his gravelly voice. Like it, you can kind of do those kind of lines in animated shows where you can kind of pull off a one-liner out of nowhere, and it works.
I do want to direct people, Matt Waters, who reviewed every single episode of Batman the Animated Series and the follow-up and Batman Beyond. Definitely go check out all of those columns that he did for The Real World. He also did specifically a written tribute to Kevin Conroy that I want to direct people's attention to. So go to entertherealworld.com to see what Matt Waters had to say. Mike Thomas and Matt Waters also reviewed Batman the Animated Series as part of the Taped Crusaders. So definitely go check that out. And we are going to continue our discussion of Kevin Conroy next month, starting in 2 weeks, actually. We're going to be doing kind of a Christmas special kind of a month run of talking about some of our favorite Christmas episodes from various TV shows. So like in 2 weeks, we will be discussing an episode of Taxi from the first season, an episode of Cheers from the 6th season, and an episode of Full House from season 2. And then the following week, we were originally going to do the Simpsons pilot, but because of the passing of Kevin Conroy, we have decided that we are going to review Christmas with the Joker as part of a look at some animated shows. So check out this lineup, Brian. We are going to be discussing Batman Christmas with the Joker, South Park, Woodland Critter Christmas, and Futurama, A Tale of Two Santas. So a very eclectic week. And I think Simpsons actually is the more thematically consistent part. But because Batman the Animated Series is animated and the theme is animation, I felt like it was only fitting that we, even though we are taking a break from Superhero Pantheon, to kind of talk about that episode and talk more about Kevin Conroy. So that is exactly what we are going to do.
For sure, and it's going to be interesting considering all 3 episodes in a certain way are dark within themselves. We'll probably end up ranking what is the darkest episode next when we review those 3 episodes, but that's coming up in a couple weeks. But also a little update. I did double check the IMDb. Kevin Conroy is listed for Batman the Cape Crusader, which comes out next year in 2023, but he's listed as Thomas Wayne for 1 episode. So there you go.
Interesting. Yeah. We'll have to see if that's like his final performance. And yeah, that would be a fitting tribute, just like we got Chadwick Boseman in What If. It would be a nice tribute. We will see if that is what indeed happens. But yeah, there really is. There's no good way of transitioning out of something like this. But I guess in a sadly thematically consistent bit of follow up, we are now going to discuss Black Panther: Wakanda Forever.
No woman, no cry. No woman, no cry. Hey, little darling, don't shed no tear. No woman, no cry. Good friends we have, and good friends we've lost along the way. In this great future, you can't forget your past. So dry your tears, I say.
All right, Brian. I just want to say that I think that coming into this movie, I think there were a lot of high expectations. The expectations come from the fact that Black Panther is generally regarded as one of the best movies ever in the MCU. I think a lot of people would have it number 1. I think there were a lot of expectations because it's Ryan Coogler. Unfortunately, with the passing of Chadwick Boseman, it felt like there was going to be this big hole in the Black Panther universe. And plus, with the pandemic being what it is, like just a lot of things coming together to potentially harm this movie. But I want to say that I think that this movie, for whatever issues that I have with it, and those are plenty, and we'll get to those. I think this movie, if you are looking for some catharsis in terms of Chadwick Boseman's unfortunate passing, I think this movie certainly delivers on that. So I kind of want to focus our conversation in 2 different ways because, again, I do want to I want to leave room for critiques that I have of the movie, but I also want to spend like part of this just acknowledging what Ryan Coogler was able to pull off. Because, again, despite the flaws, the fact that he was able to get something on screen and I think give people an opportunity to mourn in a way, I think was very, very impactful. And I think when the movie is at its best, I think it is those moments where they are paying tribute to T'Challa Chadwick Boseman, who they almost feel one in the same at this point. So I just I wanted to say that I think that what Ryan Coogler did in terms of that part of it, I think was extremely well done. And the fact that the Marvel opening was just highlights of Chadwick Boseman. Just spoilers for Black Panther. Assume we will spoil everything and anything from this point forward. Just the beginning when they announce his death and just the emotions that pour out, and a number of scenes where they are just discussing T'Challa, but very clearly dealing with the emotions of Chadwick Boseman. And then the ending payoff with Shuri kind of getting her own closure by burning the funeral outfit, and then finding out that she is an auntie, as Nakia and T'Challa bore a child before the blip, and I guess neither of them were blipped. So that is that's kind of where we paid off that T'Challa's legacy is going to continue. So Brian, let's focus on the Chadwick Boseman part of it before we get to the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it was totally what I expected from the beginning. I didn't know how they were going to approach it, but in terms of like the logic and continuity behind it, they actually made it make sense with the whole. Well, I mean, if you remember from Black Panther 1, Killmonger destroyed the entire crop of the heart-shaped herb, right? So even if the Black Panther gets injured, he might not be able to survive these injuries or whatever because he's out of that plant, right? That kind of, makes him stronger and, heals wounds and stuff like that. But when he got sick and there was no herb plant, unfortunately, he passed away, and that's the whole opening of it. You don't see him, obviously, and there's no close-up of the body or anything like that. It's just like, mural images in the background and images on the casket, but I think the way they approached it was very just so, I mean, I would say mature in a way, because you could have easily done this melodrama thing and kind of exploited for I don't know, like a TV drama, like an NBC drama or something like that. They could have done it that way, but they didn't. You know what I mean? They did it kind of respectfully, and then immediately cut to the funeral, and then it kind of just goes from there. And then the opening credit crawl, and then the reveal at the end that he had a child. That kind of goes against what people wanted, because there was this whole I wouldn't say a big thing online, but there's a smaller following that wanted to just recast him and that's it and go from there. But they if you recast them, you couldn't do that storyline they did at the end, which I think kind of plays into the more overall themes of what Marvel wants to do right now. It's that youthful push, which is why we got Riri Williams. So this idea that there's another young T'Challa out there 10 years from now that can kind of be a player on the board, I think that's more of an effective way than just kind of recasting T'Challa, and this kind of expands the board a little bit and what you want to do with the characters later on. So I think that was a better choice than just replacing him. And I think it made for the movie, even though he's not in the movie, he's very much the soul of the movie. You know what I mean? And it's very much cathartic. And we all got to say goodbye. And I know the audience, I can hear people crying in the audience. But I think the ending for that mid-credit scene made it oh my God, it's going to be okay now because the legacy is going to continue kind of thing. Because the whole idea is Angela Bassett, spoilers, dies in the middle of the movie. And it's almost as if this lineage of their family is going to end with Shuri or something like that. But little do we know that there's this other child that T'Challa had. So, but it also ties into this idea, from the first Black Panther 2, about this idea of secret children, secret relationships, all to protect them from the responsibilities and from the throne. And it's almost kind of like Game of Thrones, where it's they're protecting certain people because they don't want to have that kind of political lifestyle. You know what I mean? That's the whole idea of why they kept T'Challa's child hidden from Wakanda and wanted to give him a normal life. So I totally understood that part. And I was like, okay, because I kind of put my head in T'Challa's head, that kind of perspective. I get it. Why you wouldn't want your kid to grow up like you did? Because if you look at the way T'Challa grew up, he grew up in turmoil, war, family drama, all this political stuff, and he didn't want his kid to have that. So that I totally understood, and that worked for me very well in the story. And then everything else was just kind of the normal Marvel stuff, which is fine. I did have some issues with Namor, not based on his background, but just more so his motivations. But we can get into that a little bit later. But overall, I think the catharsis of it all, I think they just treated it so beautifully well, and it's more than you can ask for in terms of that. So
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And again, I think this is always going to be a tough one because I think Chadwick Boseman, even though he was really only in Black Panther and he played the role in other movies, but I think that he had become so closely associated with that character in rapid fashion. And look, every MCU movie makes money, but Black Panther, the 2018 movie, I mean that has the kind of cultural cachet that you just don't see in a lot of cases. So I think that in terms of following up, like how are you going to be able to do that? How are you going to be able to create a sequel? And I think this is always going to be tough. And I think there are a couple of things that they definitely had going against them. So I think they did a really beautiful job just paying tribute to Chadwick Boseman, and I think from that standpoint, I think that was successful. I think in terms of evaluating the rest of the movie, I think there are a couple of issues that I want to address. The first of which is, you've got the pandemic undoubtedly impacting this movie, when it was shot, how it was shot, but I think the pandemic also created a lot of impact because Letitia Wright is somebody who, before she was basically, I would assume Disney told her to get off Twitter. She was anti-vax. She retweeted a video that not only was against the idea of vaccinations, but was also incredibly transphobic as well. And these are not only hot button issues, but these are very real issues that continue to play to this day. And to be clear, Letitia Wright is not the only person that is anti-vax. Evangeline Lilly should also be asked these same questions in the month of February when Ant-Man comes out. And I think it's pretty irresponsible of them to be using their platform to be anti-vax and to be anti-science. And I'm just going to say that, look, just this week, I have somebody in my life who is dealing with long COVID and is dealing with like legitimate like brain injuries from COVID. And I really resent the idea of people not taking this disease seriously. And the fact that Letitia Wright retweeted what she did, and the fact that there's been this massive PR push to talk about the injuries she suffered on set, but that she will not address the tweets and all that. I think it's garbage. And again, I will say the same thing about Evangeline Lilly in February if she does not address her anti-vax beliefs as well. And look, if you want to throw Chris Pratt in there too, maybe you could throw him in there as well. But I really resent this, and I know maybe you can, if you want to separate the art from the artist, you can go right ahead. But for me, that's a huge black mark. The fact that Letitia Wright did what she did is a huge black mark for me. And look, what do I think she was very good in this movie? Absolutely. I think that I'm never going to see her in the same light though because of what she said and what she did.
Yeah, I have to separate the art from the artist in this case, but I kind of do that with most of the media that I'm consuming because dating back, like I mentioned this before, like Hitchcock was not a good dude to women at all. And he treated like a lot of his lead actors as pretty shitty on set sometimes to try to get that performance, quote unquote, out of them. But it's really a shitty thing to do. And I just, that's one of my things that I kind of hold against Hitchcock too as well, right? But I still enjoy his movies. So I kind of separate that from that. But in this case, I understand. I mean, everyone can have their own opinion. And for me, I just kind of like, okay, uh, let's say like a certain percentage of the people in the world are anti-vax. That means, the stars of your movies that you like to go to, the Marvel movies, that means that small percentage of those people are going to be anti-vax as well. So it's kind of that ratio you have to kind of put in your head. Okay, if the world's like this percentage-wise, that means the people I meet in real life are going to reciprocate those numbers. So don't be surprised if I meet an anti-vaxxer here and there that you might be cordial with or friendly with or something like that. So when I put that in my mind, I'm just like, okay, that's just kind of like the world is now. You have to deal with it. You can't just like shun people completely. You know what I mean? So there's that aspect of it. In this case, when it comes to celebrities, they have to be responsible. But if they choose not to be responsible with their tweets or whatever, that's kind of on them too. So it's part of that give and take, I guess. This, like, the spread of misinformation goes a lot around on Twitter a lot, and then you get celebrities that retweet some of that stuff. and it makes the problem worse. But at the same time, it's like, well, that's free will, and it's sometimes with free will you can't necessarily control other people by force, so you have to kind of let that go. It's very philosophical when you get down to it, but at the same time, you kind of have to make that separation. Okay, if this is the case, then I'm not going to necessarily be a supporter of the person, but I'll be a supporter of their work by like watching their movies, but not contributing to their like personal financial gain. You know what I mean?
I think that's fair. So yeah, again, I think Letitia Wright was very good in this movie. So to kind of start there, I think she does a very good job. I think the biggest problem with the movie, and I do want to focus on the movie for the rest of this conversation. I think the fundamental problem with the movie is that there's just too much going on. And I think that this has been a problem that I've had with every single Phase 4 project, starting with Black Widow. WandaVision had this problem to an extent. I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier is where it really became pronounced. But I could go to every single Marvel project in Phase 4. The Eternals, Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi probably the least of the problems. Spider-Man No Way Home definitely has this problem, even though I think people are always going to remember it and have fond memories because of the Spider-Man reunion. There's still too much going on in that movie. You've got She-Hulk, Ms. Marvel, also with, I think, some of these issues. And I think this is, again, you are in a situation where you not only have this the Chadwick Boseman / T'Challa stuff going on, you have the CIA storyline, which I personally, we did not need Everett Ross and Val in this movie. I guess the only reason that Val is in this movie is to set up Thunderbolts, which is coming out, I guess, in a couple of years, and to more clearly establish her role in the MCU. But I'll be honest, I think Julia Louis-Dreyfus is a huge miscast, and I groaned when I saw her on screen because I was like, yeah, she should not be in this movie. And I stand by that. I think that entire storyline was incredibly superfluous. And yes, you did get the funny line at the end where Okoye makes a reference about the colonizer in chains. Was that a funny line? Absolutely. Was the storyline pointless? Also, yes. So I think that is a huge problem for me. The Namor stuff is just very up and down. I think the performance is inconsistent. I think Namor as a character is kind of inconsistent. And the ending kind of feels like a cop-out in a lot of ways. And I'll be honest, this is I couldn't help but think, and I am probably the only person in the world who made this connection. But when so there is a huge battle on a boat at the end. I was thinking about the ending of Batman 66. And it wasn't as cheesy, it wasn't as goofy, but I just couldn't help myself, Brian. I just couldn't help myself.
Well, I mean, we are talking about Batman a lot recently the last couple of days, so maybe that's why I kind of stuck in your head a little bit when you saw it earlier today. But for me, the CIA stuff was kind of like shoehorned in, but at the same time, I kind of felt like, okay, like there's no other way to like connect it to the U.S. without some kind of intermediate, right? Because they had to make it seem like, because the idea is Wakanda's getting blamed for this ship attack that were run by U.S. scientists. So they're blaming Wakanda for that, when in reality it was, they're not Atlanteans. I forget what the name officially is, but it's his Namor and the underwater, society people or whatever. But because they as well have found vibranium underwater, but it's in the plant life. So this idea again that like it challenges their beliefs of the Wakandans and that they were the only ones to get vibranium. So that kind of has that little interesting thing that they're probably going to establish later on, that some of their ideals are not what they seem to be. So I thought that was a nice little tease of what's to come. But still, I think they needed to somehow connect to the U.S. And the only way to do that is we need to get this information. We need to connect it to the U.S. so that the idea is that they can suspect Wakanda the whole time. So I think they wanted to tie in some of that espionage, that kind of you can't trust some people kind of vibe, kind of like in Winter Soldier. But because of the fact that they went with this idea of the three nations kind of not trusting each other, that's where you kind of need that intermediary, where they had to bring in, Everett Ross as that intermediary to kind of get the information they needed to find the, the so-called scientist, which ends up being Riri Williams. But yeah, and the idea too that Riri Williams is this college student that builds this secret machine, I thought it was hilarious because that seems something the U.S. would do, because they just can't come up with their own scientists can't do it, so they have to find these college recruits that are smarter than the people they hired, kind of thing, and using like these parts that are just so like, because they break down the machine she makes, and it's this machine that detects vibranium, but a lot of the parts are like kind of like analog computer parts, which makes it even funnier to me, like that the idea that the government is so behind on technology, they're relying on these college kids that are just way ahead of them in terms of like, smarts and stuff. So that was I like that part of it as well. But it was getting kind of confusing as to why like Wakanda's getting blamed when it's clearly like there were blue people on the ship. We know Wakandans are not blue. So there was that kind of element going on. Like they were not saying, like they were like not mentioning the fact that these people were blue that were being attacked or were attacking. So there's little like kind of plot holes here and there just to kind of forward the story a little bit. But the overall idea is to have these three nations not trusting each other because of, and they even talk about it, natural resources and how certain countries get exploited and they don't want to get exploited. And that's why Namor's trying to protect his country. But the inconsistency is that he's like this empathetic figure and he's trying to protect these people, but he's willing to kill unnecessarily, even though that causes more problems. So I was kind of like, oh man, why'd you have to go that route when, when you were doing this thing about protecting your people and all of a sudden you're attacking Wakanda? So that kind of threw me off a little bit with the Namor character. I think that's some of the issues my friends had too, because they were like sympathizing with him and all of a sudden he just did a 180 on his rhetoric. So
Yeah, I think for me the biggest thing is that the plotting of this movie was just so clunky. I think the pacing was really off at times, and it just felt like the movie was 2 hours and 41 minutes. So it's simultaneously, again, this has been a Phase 4 problem. It felt like nothing was going on at times, and it felt like everything, like they were just trying to jam in too much stuff. I mean, it's just like they seem to imply that Riri's father was both important to her, but maybe like someone we should know. Did you get that impression? It felt like,
I thought they were setting up that Killmonger was going to be her dad, which still can happen.
I mean, I think that's a terrible idea, but it definitely felt like that they were going in that direction. And part of the
In
thing
the
is
comic,
that,
I don't think she's related. I think she's just a big fan of Iron Man in the comics.
well, the thing, so here's the weird thing to me. So I definitely noticed this, but when you first go into a room, you see the Chicago Bulls symbol. You also see a Chicago flag. So very clearly signifying that she is from Chicago. It even gets mentioned at the end of the movie. I believe in the Eternals, there are two characters that are living in a Chicago suburb, right? The Brian Tyree Henry's character and his
yeah,
husband,
and his husband, yeah, with the kids.
because they also have Bulls gear. So it's a really strange thing to me that connection is being made, and I'm very curious to see if that goes anywhere. But we are going to get an Ironheart TV show, and they did the same thing they always do. Like, she got to be Ironheart in the movie, but she's gonna have to basically start over. She can't take the suit with her, so she's gonna have to build her own suit, just like Spider-Man. And it's just like, so we're doing this story again. All right. I am very curious to see how Chicago looks in Atlanta, though. That'll be fun.
Yeah, the one thing I did get worried about though is that it seemed like they could have really easily try to tease you with X-Men stuff with the Wolverine, Antimanium, Vibranium connection.
Well, they also
Or
called Namor a mutant. I
yeah,
also want to point that
or
out.
like the fact that like they could have done the Storm thing we talked about a couple of years ago, where you introduced Storm as a Wakandan. They got avoided that.
Or at least another in another African country. Like, believe me, I am very glad they didn't do that, because very clearly Marvel's having a lot of problems with telling their stories. But yeah, here's the one thing I'll say. I will say this positive about the movie. There should be a campaign for Angela Bassett to win Best Supporting Actor for this movie. She has never won an Academy Award, and I think that's offensive. So if there is a push to get her an Academy Award, I will wholeheartedly support it. Because
I think it's coming.
I think she's easily the best part of the movie, and I believe that in a positive way and kind of a negative way. I think her performance is really, really good, but I think it becomes a problem for the movie, because at first we are following her Queen character quite a bit, then we're following Okoye, then we're following Shuri, and it really takes a long time for things to coalesce around Shuri, and I think that's a bit of a problem, because I think it leads to a focus issue.
I get what you're saying there because it felt like it was a collaborative lead kind of thing. Like mainly it was two. I would say Okoye was kind of like the like the side character. The main two were definitely Shuri and Angela Bassett. So for me, like the focus was there and it worked for me. And in terms of the pacing, I actually thought it was really good because by the end of it, I was like, man, this went by fast for me. And I don't know if it was just because I was so into the world or the storyline or just the fact that I'm a big fan of the Wakanda look and the music and stuff. But by the end of it, I was like, man, I wanted more. So I guess we're on two separate pages there. But for me, like I was like, the pacing for me was just really into it. I was so just into it that it just didn't matter to me. But I guess that's just for a few people like me who are just kind of really into it. I will say that the music wasn't as good as the first, but I think that's just because like I'm so used to hearing that T'Challa theme, but because T'Challa's not in it, it's not going to have his theme, obviously. So it had all the other themes that all the other characters, but there's a specific theme that plays in the first Black Panther that they don't really play in here. They kind of echo it during the funeral stuff, and when you see T'Challa's kid. But I was kind of missing that theme that T'Challa had. If you kind of watch the first movie, compare the soundtracks, I think you'll recognize the theme that I'm talking about that I really wanted to hear. But yeah, I would say the soundtrack was kind of like it was kind of less than the first one, but it was still really good. Like they had incorporated all these different cultures and elements to it, and the chanting was really good. But I felt like the first soundtrack was much better. But it's hard to compare because that first soundtrack is such a legendary soundtrack as it is. So like comparing one and two again, it's very difficult. But for me, I think the experience worked. I give it an 8.5 out of 10 because for me, what Ryan Coogler is so good at doing is like creating these dramatic situations where you find yourself emotionally invested in the characters and what's going on. And I tie that back to Creed because prior to Creed, I had like no emotional investment in the Rocky series. Like it was done for me. Like after Rocky Balboa, I was like, okay, I'm done. You know, I can watch the Rocky movies and not get sad or just kind of like think about other stuff. You know what I mean? Like I just have fun with the movies. When Creed came out and he elevated the drama in those movies to something that it wasn't until like the original Rocky. He brought that elevated drama to the series, and now with Creed 2 and 3, even though he's not the director, that feeling of elevated drama is still there. If you watch the trailer for Creed 3 now, you still feel that drama that stems from that first movie because Ryan Coogler was able to take that and bring it back to it. And what he's able to do in this movie is take these crazy situations that are going on with the underwater people and Namor and the United States not trusting Wakanda and the vibranium issue and the heart issue. He takes all that, but he's still able to have these dramatic scenes in the movie that get you so emotionally invested. It's like almost if he's able to ground the movie with like those like discussions like between like Angela Bassett and Shuri at the water, or when they're near the water about to burn the sacred garment from the funeral. Like that discussion, that felt such like a grounded situation and scene. Like I think Ryan Coogler is like at his strength when he's able to do that. Like he did that in Black Panther. He's done it here. I still haven't seen Real Station, but I'm probably gonna watch it soon. But I think he's just so good at making drama.
It is Fruitvale Station is on HBO Max, so you have no excuse. It's a really short watch, so definitely I recommend you do that. I mean, this is definitely my least favorite of Ryan Coogler's oeuvre, so to speak.
Yeah, and then spoiler alert, we got Killmonger coming back in a cameo that I yelled "Holy shit" loud in the audience, and I got away with it because I was in shock. Usually I call those things, and I was like, "That's going to be Angela Bassett." And when Killmonger showed up,
I sort of figured it was going to be Michael B. Jordan because I feel like if it was Angela Bassett, they would have just had her right away. And the fact that they did the big reveal, I definitely sort of figured that Michael B. Jordan was going to do a cameo with Chadwick Boseman not being in the movie. It almost felt like they had to have Michael B. Jordan even in a cameo as kind of a tribute. Like even though they were on opposite sides, I think it's only fair to bring in that character.
Yeah, and it was a big like pop from the audience. Like I was looking at my friends like side by side, and we were just like shocked, and then kind of like, okay, calm down, let's see what he has to say, and then he gives this speech. I mean, it's great. He does such a great job for 5 minutes that he's in it. So definitely worth the wait on that one because I
mean, yeah, and
he
definitely overshadows Namor, who I know I've seen some people praise the performance I don't think it's bad. I think he does a good job in some areas, but I think the characterization is the problem.
Inconsistent. It's like,
There
why
is, yeah.
killing these people when you're trying to maintain peace? And even M'Baku like got it right. He's like, if we kill him, you're risking eternal war because they worship this guy like a god, and it's never going to end.
Right.
So I like that fact, but then how come he wasn't able to pick up on that fact, being alive for 500 years and the leader of these people?
And how does it take Shuri so long? Like, Shuri blew him up, and it's like, Shuri, you definitely could have killed him by blowing him up. Not sure about that strategy, but Winston Duke is very good. I think that
and him coming into his own,
he could very easily have gotten lost. I think he is the perfect kind of supporting character.
He's king. He's officially king now. So.
He is officially the king. So
cool.
Undoubtedly there will be a Black Panther 3. What do you think, Brian? I don't think Ryan Coogler. I think this is his last movie. I think he's moving on to something else.
He definitely needs a break from Marvel. I would probably even consider Michael B. Jordan directing the next one. You know what I mean?
I don't think Michael B. Jordan is going to come back. I think if he's going to direct, he's going to direct his own thing. Like, he's coming. Creed 3 is coming out in March.
Yeah, man,
and that's going to be a big deal.
The trailer looks so good, and and you can tell he learned a lot from Ryan Coogler, I think.
Ryan Coogler seems to have a little bit more involvement in Creed 3. He's got a story by credits, so my guess is that he's going to have a little bit more involvement. Jonathan Majors is absolutely incredible, and the fact that Michael B. Jordan is going to get to play off of him, I mean, Creed 3 is going to be incredible. So, we've got Creed 3, we've got more Jonathan Majors in Ant-Man to look forward to, which we'll see how that all turns out. But in terms of Black Panther, I just want to see, was there anything else that I wanted to discuss? I think this movie, I think it's just very, very inconsistent, and I think that I don't know how you fix it, but I think there needs to be a conversation within Marvel about dedicating some time to actually focusing the stories more. I think they need to make their TV shows, not 6-hour movies or whatever the fuck they want to call them. I think they need to get their movies down to 2 hours. I think if you want to have the Avengers movies be 3 hours, like, fine, go ahead. I know you've got like 60 characters. Like, if you want to do something like Infinity War or Endgame and do that, go for it. But you can't have movie after movie be 2.5 hours, or even Thor, which wasn't 2 hours, but felt like they overstuffed it to death. They have to focus more. I think they have to make these movies feel less trauma. Like, every movie also feels like there's so much trauma going on too. And I think that you can have a deeper meaning in these movies without every single movie just having some sort of traumatic death. It's getting ridiculous at this point that every single, like, you could go through every single movie and you're dealing with some traumatic death. Like, I'm not going to spoil it, but like, you could go back to Thor: Love and Thunder. Spider-Man No Way Home definitely has one. Like, Black Widow has the shadow of Black Widow's death, and WandaVision, need I say more there? Like, we really need to get away from this.
Well, I guess it's part of what Kevin Feige kind of wanted from Phase 4, in that it's supposed to be this thing about loss and mourning from the 5-year snap that fucked everything up.
But the thing is, so here's the thing. The blip is something that I actually want to address, because I think they handled the Nakia stuff. At first, I was like, okay, why is Nakia not in the movie? I think giving her the kid, I think that actually kind of solves that problem for me. To me, the fundamental problem with the blip is I don't think any movie has directly addressed it well. I think you've gotten some hints at certain things, like with WandaVision and Monica Rambeau coming back. I think you've gotten some little things like Florence Pugh in Hawkeye, but I don't think we've ever gotten like a really extended, like, what is the actual impact on the world? Like, again, Falcon and the Winter Soldier kind of did it, but they kind of copped out on it. And I feel like Black Panther kind of does the same thing, because, like, yes, it sucks that T'Challa died, but he was also gone for 5 years. Like, he was gone 5 years beforehand. So as tragic as it is, like, the tragedy is that he was gone for 5 years, came back, and then died. Like, that's the tragic part of it. And I don't think they ever really addressed it. Like, they address it as this very specific kind of loss that I'm not sure is consistent with what happened. And very specifically, a scene that really bothered me is when Okoye gets fired by the Queen. And it's like, okay, so the events of Black Panther, yes, they do matter. But Okoye was also running Wakanda for like 5 years. Like, Okoye presumably is the reason that Wakanda did not fall apart while the entire family was gone. So if she wants to be mad, like, that's fine. But to bring up that specific incident without acknowledging everything that she did during the blip was absolutely absurd to me.
Yeah, it's that continuity issue that not all the writers are on the same page, and it's those little details. It's happening. I mean, we're counting now. It's like 30 movies to have this continuity together, so there will be some cracks and some slips through the cracks, and that's kind of one of them. But yeah, I totally see that, and I guess from what I was reading, just like the idea, if Chadwick was still alive, the idea was him going through this like depression from the fact that he was gone for 5 years and he feels like he failed as a leader or something like that, which I totally see too. But because he died, that had to go out the window. And
yeah, I mean
that's probably the movie that we were all expecting anyway, if he was alive, because I mean that's a big thing to deal with.
If that actually, I think, solves one of Phase 4's biggest problems, is them not doing a good job of addressing the blip. I think if that had been what they were able to do, and of course, I don't blame Ryan Coogler for that specifically, but I mean that really, really solves the problem, I think.
Yeah, and I guess they kind of want to brush over it too, because it's this idea that we want to move forward. Because even if you watch Endgame, I had that same feeling too with the moment that happened when it jumped 5 years. I was like, this is going to be a big fucking deal that they're going to come back to, because 5 years is a ton of time, man. And, at the time, like when that happened, now we're actually 5 years from the actual blip. So I feel like now the MCU is going to catch up and just be stable from now on, and not necessarily have to refer to the blip anymore, because now it's kind of this past thing.
They can do that, but it just feels like they've just left a ton on the table. And it just feels like the fact that the blip hasn't been that impactful, I think, is a problem. I think it's a huge problem, because, I mean, COVID was 2 years, and I think it has had a profound change on our society just in those 2 years. And obviously we haven't lost half the people, but the blip would have a profound impact on the world, and I just don't think the MCU has reflected that.
Yeah, I kind of see that too. It's at the same time, it's like, it's a kids-oriented kind of thing too as well. Like, we still got to focus on, kids buying merch. So I get that, but
I mean, you say that, but I mean, spoiler alert for Thor: Love and Thunder, like, Natalie Portman dies of breast cancer in that movie. So, like, you say that there's a kids part of it, and yes, there is, but I mean, think about all the tragic shit we've seen. Like, one of the most important characters in the Eternals literally kills himself by throwing himself in the sun.
Yeah, it's just it's inconsistent, man. But that's the thing when you have all these different, creators and come together, and especially with Phase 4, like, there's these big expectations coming out of Endgame. So, well, and I've heard the complaints too. So,
I think the biggest problem is that I think the writing has been a huge problem, and I think they really need to think about investing in screenwriters who know what they're doing, and I don't know how they're going to do that, but I think that inconsistently that's been the biggest problem. Has been, if I look at every MCU movie, and that includes Black Panther now, that includes all of the TV shows, the scripts are the worst part. I mean, I think the casting is fine. Like, I love the fact that they brought in Haley Steinfeld and Florence Pugh and Tatiana Maslany, and like, I just think they have consistently done a really good job of bringing in the right people. Like, bringing in Charlie Cox is a fantastic move, even though that's not their casting. But bringing him back is a tremendous thing that they've done. Iman Vellani as Ms. Marvel is also somebody else. Brian may not like her, but she is a big ball of charisma that
she's got time. She's got time to grow. It's like watching Sid Vicious in 1989.
Brian, it's an all-time bad take by you.
I don't know. It's just like she has potential, but right now it was like watching.
No, she is
like watching The Rock in '96 or something, man. I profoundly
disagree with you on this.
She's got
And
potential. It's just,
and
man.
Brian and Ben, or I'm sorry, Matt and Ben are going to yell at you as well in a few weeks when we do our crossover. So I'm going to prepare you that for now.
I'm fine with that. It's just there's something about kid actors that bother me sometimes when I know that they're so green.
She's 20 years old.
She's still green. Like, you can still be green, I think. I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking too much wrestling in my head right now, but I feel like her and the other guy, the lead, her best friend, we're not ready yet. Not ready for prime time.
Well, we're going to see her in the Marvels, but like I said, Brian and I are going to be taking a significant break from doing Superhero Pantheon. We will be doing a crossover with Ben Phillips and Matt Waters in a few weeks. We are going to be ranking all the Marvel projects. We're going to be ranking the movies and the TV shows. So you've got that to look forward to, but then we are going to be taking a significant break. We will be doing Christmas-related material next month, and then we will be announcing our future plans. But yeah, we are not going to be reviewing a lot of superhero content the next year or so. And it's because I am very burned out on superheroes, and I will say Dwayne Johnson and Phase 4 are the biggest reasons that we are taking a break, because I really did not want to see Super Pets or Black Adam and talk about them on this podcast. I feel pretty vindicated reading the reviews of Black Adam. And like I said, Phase 4 I just think has been a very mixed bag. I think the problem with Phase 4 is that we would be saying the same things over and over again. And even with the Black Panther conversation, I feel like we've been having some of the same conversations that we've been having on Phase 4, and we will probably have in our crossover episode in a couple of years. But yeah, that's definitely all. That's definitely what we have to look forward to. So, Brian, are you excited to be talking about Christmas in a couple weeks?
I mean, it was my idea, and it's something different, and the run times are great because it's not like we're dreading a 2.5 hour movie that we may or may not like. Yeah, it's short and simple and to the point, and I think that's kind of where we're leading to for Pantheon Plus next year. I feel like we're going to be focusing less on like these epic movies and have some more fun with like 90-minute to 2 hour movies, and that's kind of a hint of what's to come for like probably January, February. We're planning something fun, everybody, and it has to do with sequels, and that's all I'm going to say. But a lot of these sequels that we're putting on the list, like 90 minutes to 2 hours, perfect.
So we've got that to look forward to. So for Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again in 2 weeks. R.I.P. Kevin Conroy. R.I.P. Chadwick Boseman. Rest in peace. #Cancer stinks.
Wakanda forever.